Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to My Money, Your Money, where we talk about all things money with the goal of closing the racial wealth gap. Today's show is supported by our generous sponsors, Demesman and Dover Accident Attorneys, FAMU Mary, and the AARP. I'm your host, Brigette Lumpkins. I earned an MBA from Wharton, and I have worked at firms such as Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers, covering private and institutional clients, as well as raising capital for investment funds. I'm so excited to talk to you about today's show, which is a little bit special. We were featuring an on-location event at the Perez Art Museum, Miami, hosted by the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust and led by Commissioner Danielle Cohen Higgins. And it was a conversation about Black wealth creation, featuring special guests Emmet, a former co-owner of Shea Moisture, which was sold to Unilever for $1.6 billion. So talk about wealth creation. Also, Joy Roadfox, who runs second generation, runs her family construction firm, and Willie Woods, a private equity investor who recently moved his firm, ICV Partners, to Miami with over $1 billion in assets under management. So they talked and shared their insights about private wealth, about wealth creation, and it was to a packed house. So really, we're going to hear from them a little later in the program from my man on the street interviews, and let's get after it. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to My Money, Your Money, where we talk about all things money with the goal of closing the racial wealth gap. I'm your host, Brigette Lumpkins, and I am thrilled to welcome you tonight because we outside. We're here at the Perez Art Museum, Miami, also known as the PAM, for a discussion on Black wealth creation, hosted by MDEAT, the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust, and Commissioner Danielle Cohen Higgins, with illustrious guests Emmet, Joy Roadfox, and Willie Woods. We're going to talk to all of those people more later, but in the meantime, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
But that everyone that made it through that passage had to be the strongest of all time.
Everything you want in life is right outside your comfort zone. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Spending time with my family and my loved ones, that is truly wealth to me. And being able to give back to the community and the people that I care about.
And here today, we manage something like $1.5 billion. We've done 31 investments. So that's kind of how I got where I am.
But it was important to me to create a community, to create a conversation, a space where our community can get together and hear real stories about how individuals have been able to achieve success and build narratives amongst our community around these successes and help change the narrative nationally about what our identity looks like.
So it's a great event. That sizzle reel doesn't really do it justice. We were followed outside by, it was followed outside by a great reception. There were tons of people in attendance, I would say, well over 100. And our illustrious guests really showed some amazing insight. So I had the privilege of speaking to most of them afterwards. And I want to start, however, with Hannibal Burton, who chairs MDEAT, the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust, and is responsible for this programming and the programs that are helping the Black community to build wealth. So I think we have some words from him coming up right now. We're joined here by Hannibal Burton, who is the chairman of the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust. Thank you for joining us, and what a great event this evening.
Yes, it was.
Really substantive conversation. And when you talk about the event calendar for MDEAT and making this information accessible to the community, what are your plans for the coming year?
Well, we're working on several different initiatives, everything from housing to youth services. Economic development, of course, is a constant conversation. Events like this are needed in an ongoing and perpetuating type of manner because we need to bring the communities in. And I know I haven't answered your question yet. I'm getting there. We need to bring the communities in so that they can hear the information, hear the stories, and become motivated and take these back to the communities. But what we're doing in terms of how are we building the calendar, how are we letting everybody know? We're doing everything from hitting the radio stations to digital marketing to word of mouth, attending other events and being on deck there. We're working on housing initiatives, not just in terms of affordable housing, but getting into development. We're looking at a deeper dive on youth services. Historically, we're looking at teen court, but now we want to branch out and get into teen entrepreneurship. These types of things, building our future workforce, so to speak, because if you don't have those future workforce in the community, then the community doesn't thrive.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the challenges, and I was just talking about this with Commissioner Cohen Higgins, is affordability, right? And so many people in our community are being driven further west, further south, further north. What are your thoughts on that? And how does MDEAT work to try to help people stay in Miami-Dade County and near where they work?
Well, it's real. And one of the things that we have going on now is we're conducting a disparity study, or we have a third-party firm that's conducting a disparity study for us, and we'll be presenting that in a few months. But it's dealing with home ownership. It's dealing with economic equity in our communities. It's dealing with affordable housing, going back to home ownership, not just homeowner assistance, but being able to actually develop housing. We have to deal with being able to keep our talents here in Miami. Miami has become an investment state, if you will. There are a lot of external investors, and that is driving up the price of everything. And it's making it hard for you to be here. If you aren't already here, if you aren't already in place, if you're not established, it's kind of hard to come in and set up unless you've got big pockets, which in that case, you would be one of the investors, which is going against what we're trying to do. So the root of it is dealing with the economic equity, dealing with affordable housing. If we can conquer those, then we can kind of turn the tide, so to speak, so that people can afford to be here. Miami's a great place to be. You can't beat it. But it's also an expensive place to be, and it's getting a little more expensive.
Right. Absolutely. When I first moved here back in the day, it was cheap. And now that has completely changed. I have one more question for you. I understand a lot of your programs are focused around community development, making grants, et cetera. What are the legislative or political priorities of MDEAT? How do you advocate politically to maybe see legislative or policy change beyond the scope of the actual mandate of MDEAT?
Well, again, we have to get into the data. There's a lot of initiatives out there, but you've got to back them up with data. And I'm going to go back to we're conducting a disparity studies, and it's going to look at everything from our youth services, how our communities are being policed, economic development, how our businesses are situated, and I think Willie said it best. It's not fair when you look at how the businesses are being financed. But then on the flip side of that, we've also had to address how we conduct our businesses. So we've got to deal with the lenders, so to speak, and the borrowers. If this is what you want to be, this is how you have to be. You got to conduct your business a certain way. And then we've also got to put both entities in the room so that we can connect the dots. I like to say that a lot, connecting the dots, because we don't own all of the resources. So we can bring in somebody else that has a set of resources that we don't, and we can point you in that direction. And in terms of legislative, we take the data. I'm circling back now. We take the data, which comes from these studies, and then we put it on the table. And how do we approach this? If the percentage of black home ownership is this, how do we help to increase that? If the rate of black businesses failing in the communities is this, how do we support them being better equipped to maintain and perpetuate their businesses? So we develop seminars, we develop educational sessions, if you will. We bring in external gurus, and we partner up with other entities of the same ilk to kind of perpetuate these initiatives.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all that you do, Chairman Burton. We really appreciate you taking time to talk with us tonight. Thank you. So, Chairman Burton was so gracious and really laid out the agenda for MD quite articulately. And there's a lot that they're covering, but it's a really profoundly impactful program for Black wealth creation in Miami-Dade County. After I talked to Chairman Burton, I had an opportunity to talk to Commissioner Danielle Cohen Higgins, who really has been a catalyst for having these conversations. As a Jamaican immigrant herself, she feels really passionately about the path to wealth creation for Black folks, especially here in Miami-Dade County. So I'd love for us to hear a little bit of what she had to say at the event on Wednesday.
Commissioner Cohen Higgins, thank you so much for hosting this amazing event and conversation on wealth creation, specifically in the Black community. And I know it's dear to your heart. And I'm very curious to know, in addition to the work you're doing with MDEAT, what are your other priorities as a commissioner for this session?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question. And, really connecting with the conversation we had tonight, affordability is top of mind for everyone in Miami-Dade County. And there's certainly affordable units coming on market, but they're rentals. And as our panelists spoke about tonight, right, wealth is not going to be created for our families unless we own something. So we're working very hard with the Homestead Housing Authority to acquire a parcel of land to be able to create an affordable housing community with modular homes. These are homes that are created in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost, and they can truly be delivered for home ownership at an affordable price at or under $350,000 for 3 and 4 bedroom homes. So we're working very, very hard to create that opportunity in South Dade and District 8.
And what do you think the timeline for that is? Because, this is an urgent need now. Most of us have felt the pinch of tremendous housing inflation at all levels.
Absolutely.
Throughout the county.
Yeah, so listen, this is government, so we move very quickly. I'm obviously being sarcastic. Unfortunately, the red tape is significant, but the Madam Mayor is on board. We're transitioning between housing directors. So unfortunately, that will likely create an additional delay, but it is a priority for my office. We've been working on this for over a year, and so hopefully within the near future. I wish I could give a more specific time, but I certainly don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We are working on it. It is a top priority.
And what other issues do you think face the Black community in terms of wealth creation here? Not everyone has the opportunity to create $1.6 billion companies, as one of our panelists was able to do. So what do you see as other ways to support wealth creation?
Yeah, I've been a small business owner for more than 15 years now, so I understand the struggles of creating something, owning something, and then making it a success, which is why my office created a small business academy. We do it every single year. We've had 2 graduating classes. We offer this to the residents of District 8 that own small businesses, where they can plug in during a 7-week course, learn, connect with resources from financing and banking, HR, marketing, and learn the tools that they need that they can turn around, take back to their businesses to make them grow. So I'm very committed to helping our small business community in South Dade and District 8, and that's just one of many examples.
Well, thank you so much. We do appreciate your commitment to the community. And thank you so much again for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm struck when I watched that by how much taller she is than I am. I was wearing flats and she was wearing heels, but she's a pretty tall lady, but also really excellent commitment to the community and has been consistent. And we applaud the work that Commissioner Danielle Cohen Higgins is doing in the community and her advocacy for us. I was also able to catch up with Emmet Dennis, who was really stood out as being really insightful and profound in his observations on the panel. And he is the former co-owner of Shea Moisture, which was sold to Unilever for $1.6 billion, as I mentioned earlier. And so he really has a lot of wisdom that he garnered building that business and helping to build that business and throughout the whole process. So I hope we can hear from him a bit right now.
Here with Emmet Dennis, one of the previous owners of Shea Moisture, which was sold to Unilever for $1.6 billion in a record-breaking sale for a Black-owned brand. And really, he shared some great insights with us tonight. And I'm curious to know, when you talk about wealth and the Black community and entrepreneurship in particular, we sometimes equate entrepreneurship with wealth creation, but that is very often not the case.
What they also don't understand, especially if you're playing in spaces like the beauty space, like the CPG space, there are a lot larger conglomerates, right, that can spend far more money than we can. So when you get to a certain size and a certain scale, there's only really two options. Those guys come after you. They either acquire you or they kill you.
Right.
And oftentimes what our communities don't necessarily realize is that those companies are using them against us. They don't realize who's infiltrating their social media. They don't realize the reverse engineering of the narrative that those companies are using to have Black people go after Black-owned businesses, right? But to your second part of your question, I think that what we're starting to see, and certainly what my family has done, it was a huge, huge blessing to build a community of consumers that fell in love with the brand, that took full ownership of the brand, right? But the truth of the matter is that brand didn't make any money for them. It was of extreme value to them, but it didn't make any money for them, right? So at least the thesis that we've been trying to prove is once we came into that type of opportunity, why not start to reinvest into entrepreneurs and into communities?
And taking Essence back.
Taking Essence back was a huge part of it. So if you think about the magazine, if you think about the festival, the largest festival in this country, right? And if you think about all the jobs that come from that particular entity, right? Essence was on a massive downward spiral while Time Inc. owned it. I'm happy to report in the few years that we've had it, it's been a massive transformation and a massive uptake. And I'm not going to give numbers today, but we feel very proud and very blessed. And it's just another example of how taking back one of our institutions, right, and using that institution to educate and employ and empower, actually not empower, remind people of their power. I think that's what's happening. And I think that's what needs to continually happen, that I can empower you. I can remind you that you can take your power.
Wow, very profound. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate and celebrate you. And thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
So Emmet really hit the audience with some very, very profound things when he was originally asked during the panel, how did he get where he was? And he said, I come here from a place of trauma, which really brought the house down. And, there was a hush, you could hear a pin drop. And he went on to talk about his story. And I think, a lot of people who are very successful have trauma-informed backgrounds. And so he was really spiritual and thoughtful in his responses. And I want to say the clip you just saw really was about my asking him, what is it like to build a Black company that's Black owned, and then you sell it to a majority company like Unilever, which is not Black owned, and then that company ceases to be a wealth engine for the Black community. But they took the proceeds of that and bought Essence back from its captors, Time Warner, which had, Essence is a cultural institution, and so they really were able to make the proceeds work more in favor of the Black community. So it's not just all about, you sold to a white company and now what? They continue to do the work in the community, leveraging the wealth they created from Shea Moisture, of which I was a big fan for a long time. And finally, we have Willie Woods, who, as I mentioned, founded ICV Partners. It's a private equity firm. Willie's Harvard educated and also went to Morehouse across the street from where I went to Spelman. So a proud Morehouse man, and recently relocated his firm down to Miami. And I asked him some questions about succession and how to keep, similar to what I asked Emmet around, once you create a wealthy enterprise, how do you keep that enterprise as a wealth generation engine in the Black community? So now I think we have some words from Willie Woods.
We're here with Willie Woods, founder of ICV Partners, a private equity firm newly based in Miami with over $1 billion in assets under management. And Willie, thank you so much for your insightful comments on the panel tonight. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Okay, thank you.
And you said something, we talked a little bit about generational wealth, and you started this firm that's very profitable, it's very successful, that you want to see endure after you're gone. And my question to you is, how do you preserve or keep that wealth that you're your firm has generated and will continue to generate in the Black community. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And it all goes back to why ICV was founded. ICV was founded because I saw a lack of opportunities for people of color in the private equity business. So part of our mission was to do something about that. And the doing something about that meant hiring a lot of people who look like me. So if you go to our firm's website, you will see 98% of the people that work at ICV are people of color, mainly, right? And whether that be associates, vice presidents, my partners, that was our intent because we didn't have opportunities at some of those bigger firms. So I wanted to make sure we provided a ground for that. And having now done that, the next generation after me, all are people who look like me. And so hopefully when I'm long gone, that next generation of people of color who I hired 10 years ago, 15 years ago, will be the ones still running the firm and making sure that things we've set in place today will carry on and years and years after I'm long gone.
Great. Thank you so much. That sounds like a good plan to me.
All right.
And we really appreciate you coming to Miami and bringing the opportunity to the city.
Happy to do it.
All right.
All right.
So Willie was so gracious to answer those questions after the reception because it was just about time for folks to start going home. And it really was a wonderful event sponsored by MDEAT and Commissioner Cohen Higgins. I learned so much. Like I said, there were well over 100 people in attendance, really looking to learn more about ways to generate Black wealth and how to maintain it and intergenerational wealth transfer. And I encourage you to pay attention to MDEAT's calendar if you have any curiosity about their events in the future, because they're really doing a great job with content creation for the community. Speaking of events, there's another event coming up this week. Bank of America has a panel discussion on Thursday, March 2nd, sponsored, focused on small businesses. It's an all-day event at the FIU ballrooms from 10 to 4 a.m. But of particular interest at 11 a.m., there's a panel on investment and financial opportunities. And it's going to be hosted by the Deputy Director of Communications and Community and Economic Development, Michael John Green, with guest speakers Althea Harris from the Small Business Development Agency and Chisholm Marie, VP of the New Voices Fund. And the focus is going to be how to get the money to start your business. And that's a huge problem, right? Because we don't have wealth. We don't necessarily, our community, some of us do, but our community generally doesn't have that friends and family round of wealth or that trust from their grandmother or that insurance policy from an uncle to start a business and keep themselves fed while they build that business. And so finding financing options is critical to Black entrepreneurship. So they're going to be talking about that down at FIU at 11 a.m. on Thursday, March 2nd. So I really hope you can join it. And, I really hope you've enjoyed this program. We're going to be outside more. So stay tuned as we cover more financially oriented events that impact the Black community in South Florida. But in the meantime, please join our other MIA Media Group shows. Monday, The Business of Black Business at 1 p.m. with Jay Reynolds. Tuesday, My Money, Your Money with yours truly, Brigette Lumpkins at 7 p.m. Wednesday, Soul with Nikki Gelland at 7 p.m. Thursday, Lunch with Legacy Leaders with Anne-Marie Sorrell at noon. And The Taste of South Florida with the legendary Chef Irie at 7 p.m. And Friday, Black Health at 2 p.m. with Dr. Michelle Kerwan. We really appreciate you joining us, and let's work together to close that gap.